to them. And a lot of people have made great inventions in the world, and we appreciate electricity. But yes, Carrier was the one who invented air conditioning. And that's why we never, so every time I feel, I say, y'all say thank you to Mr. Carrier. Now, I'm thank you to Edison and Bell Telephone and anybody else, and McDonald's for their hamburgers. We're thankful for Ronald McDonald. But I tell you what, I'm thankful for Mr. Carrier. And nobody ever talks about the guy. I think I have a lesson called Unsung Heroes of the Bible. You know, in the book of Hebrews, at the end, you know, remember they had the list of all the, Hebrews 11 has Samson and Adam, has Abraham and Sarah, all the heroes. It's called the heroes of the Bible. And then it says a lot of others who did things, but their names aren't there. It says they subdued kingdoms, and those are kind of the unsung heroes because you don't know their name. And that's what I think I use his as an example. No one knows who the guy is. His family doesn't care. They make millions of dollars, you know, for the inheritance from the man. But Mr. Carrier, always remember his name, please. He invented the air conditioning. All righty. Well, just like we talked about last night about marriage, you know, I don't claim to be an expert when it comes to subjects, you know, come to being a great mate. I know what the Bible teaches, and same with being a parent. Probably one of the hardest jobs. And again, when do you realize? When do you really realize? You think a child doesn't realize how hard it is. What age do you think you realize that, boy, being a parent is difficult? When do you realize that? Well, when they're born, is that when you really realize how hard it is when they're born? You haven't had any teenagers yet, have you? I think it's, when they're born, I'm going to talk about that. That's the one thing I'm going to talk about. Oh, man, I didn't know it was going to be like this. But, hey, wait till they get to be teenagers. And I'm here to tell you, even when they get married, man, I thought I was going to be over with you guys, you know. And now it's a different kind. It's not like they can't find their shoes. It's they can't find their wallet. They need some money. It's a whole nother thing. So being a parent just like getting married, you know, you get married and your honeymoon, that time, and that's the joyful time, and then you got to go through some ups and downs and all those things. So same with being a parent, you know. So we'll talk about it for a few moments, and then the second part I told you I'm going to talk about in the blended family and what it's like to be married a second time, and that there's no books that teach you. There's no books, and I'll show you some examples of that I learned. And what it's like, because everybody, it's a good part. It's just like, am I going to you ask a girl who's 15 or a boy 15, you going to get married? Oh, yeah, I'm going to get married. Oh, you're going to be a parent? Yeah, that's just kind of the process. And no one thinks that they won't be remarried. But as you will talk about, you know, you could lose a dad. It could be a death. It could be a divorce. It could be anything. Now you're going to have to be in a blended family, and there's nothing that can prepare you for it, really. And so you just we'll talk about that and what it was like for me, and maybe it'll help somebody. Okay, let's have a prayer. Father, as always, we're so thankful that you love us. And just for another day today that we can all come together. Help us, Father, to learn about today now to be good parents. And it's in the Bible. You've told us. May we be wise enough to learn it and try to put it in our lives and do the things that will help us to help ourselves to be that godly parent and, of course, to raise our children in the godly way. Thank you so much for loving us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let me just double check what time this group time ends at. About 11:30. Around 11:30? That sounds right. Yeah. I thought I was going to begin my lesson today by telling you these truths. I was going to tell you it's the greatest thing to be a parent. And I love my children so much. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have my kids. They bring me so much happiness. And there's many more things. I thought I'd start off by saying those things and that God says are true. But I didn't realize any of these things till I'd been a parent for a while. Because it takes time to learn these things. And it takes time to be a godly parent. But you'll realize on your way to achieving those things, there's a lot of sad times being a parent. And there's a lot of disappointing times. And there's scary times. You've done everything you can for your little child, and they're sick. What are you going to do now? And you're the parent. And so to define your success as being a godly parent, it's not just something that begins early. It's something that continues all the way, till you leave this earth, really. Notice now I said a godly parent. Because most parents, of course, they provide lots of things for the children. They provide security, they provide physical needs and emotional and social and those things. But the difference between a parent and a godly parent, that's what we want to do, is our goal is to help our children make it into heaven. That's our goal. Not that the other parents, I've met lots of people, even myself, I wasn't so much a church-going kid growing up, but if I would have been married and never gone, I still want my children to go to heaven. And so I probably make sure they didn't swear too much, and, make sure they didn't steal too much, I had some boundaries, but a godly parent is someone who says, this book tells you how to be a godly parent. And I'm going to learn it so I can teach it to my children. And then I'm going to do all I can to help my children learn it. And that's what we talk about. And so many times when I say godly parent, that's what we all want to be. We don't want to just be a parent. Anything. You don't want to be mediocre in anything. You want to try to be the best at whatever you're going to be. So you want to be the best parent you can be. And that's why we talk about we're going to try to be, as we said, we're going to try to be a godly parent. And so to be a godly parent, first of all, you've got to be what? You got to be godly. The greatest way you can teach your children, of course, and we'll talk about that, is you got to show them. You can't just tell them. And you've got to show them how to do it. And so you practice being that Christian, godly person that you can. Okay. Let me say plainly, it's hard to be a godly parent. You can be a rotten parent pretty easy. You just don't do anything. Give them everything. It's hard to be a godly parent. Children don't come with a manual. By the time you figure them out, they're off to college. That's the way it is. And having children is not like it is on TV. Now, when I was growing up, leave it to Beaver. I'm showing my age. Mrs. Cleaver always wore a nice dress with pearls. And Mr. Cleaver had his suit on. And everybody sat nice at the dinner table. Remember that? I mean, that was a lot of us just ate like that. That's the way it was. And if they did something bad, it was something silly. Like Beaver one time, do you remember he got his head caught in the post of the fence in front of the city hall? And that was, what a terrible thing to do, He didn't shoot anybody. He didn't get arrested. He got his head stuck in. That was a terrible thing to have your child do. And then one time he got stuck in a cup up in a big advertisement on the marquee. He thought there was real smoke, real soup coming out of the coffee cup or something, and he jumped in it. And, those are the kind of things. But I tell you, it's not like that. It's not like TV. If it was going to be easy to be a parent, it wouldn't start with something called labor. You ever thought of that? Labor, that's work. It sure is work. It's a lot of work. Most people, and again, even the idea of the first time you have a baby, when your first child, I know you can watch movies and see things, like in childbirth class and things like that. And again, the mother doesn't realize how much pain it is. I don't think, did y'all know? I'm not saying, it's painful. I've been there, but all I can say is, it's going to be okay. It can't hurt that much. Sometimes you say to the doctor, is she really hurting that bad? Usually the doctors are nice. They say, just be quiet. When my Brighton was born, she's going to be 5 coming up in October the 5th. When she was born, and Laura went into labor, and it was going to be Laura's 4th baby, so my 7th in that sense. But the lady that was the lady that ran the nursing department, she had 5 nursing students with her, and she said, and we knew her through church, and she said, would it be okay if these nurses watched a delivery? They've never seen a baby delivered, and they were seniors in college. They're going to get on to be, and they'd never seen one. And again, they needed to see one to see what it was like. And these young girls never had a baby themselves. So, and Laura said, again, mothers, maybe you understand this more than anybody else. After you've had a couple of babies, and you've tried to maybe be, what's the word? Modest, yes. it's not much modesty when it comes. So we had the 5 kids, but by the time, then 3 others came. By the time we had 8 students that were at the front, 7 guys, 7 girls, and a man, I remember. And they'd never seen a baby delivered. And just the reaction of what happens. And I'll tell you this story to say that these kids, again, they're college kids, but they did not, the girls did not know how much pain. And the boy did it. In fact, before the baby was delivered, we said, I remember we said a prayer when it was getting kind of close. And then the baby was delivered, and there were 16 people altogether in the room. And then I said a prayer. I said, the baby, you know, the baby gave me the baby before they, you know, and it's changed. I remember from the first time I was in there, you couldn't go in the room. To now, you're right beside it, and that's another thing. That I said a prayer, and as I was praying, I heard like this. And I know it wasn't the doctor. He delivered probably a couple that morning, and the nurses are used to doing it. All 8 kids, I call them kids, but they're like 21 are kids, I guess. All of them were crying. And now I'm crying. The boy was crying. The boy was crying probably more than any of them. They were crying. It was such a beautiful thing to see. And after, you know, they said, thank you so much. And they were all really nice, you know. And they'll always remember. The first baby they saw was wanting to be delivered. And they said, you know, they were saying like, boy, I didn't know how quick it was. Well, then the doctor would say, it's not always that quick. Or I didn't know this and I didn't know that. And boy, she screamed a bit, didn't she? You know, something like that. Do they all scream? I mean, just those kind of things. So, and then the people are crying. So the idea that, oh, this is going to be easy. On TV, it's easy. But it's not. It's not in real life, of course. And then when the baby comes, when Mariah was born, she's 36 now, my girl Mariah, she's a neonatal nurse. She went from, she had a boo-boo, she was going to die, to now she's fixing boo-boos, you know, so they changed. And during that time, that was about, you know, 36 years ago, guys started doing some things with the babies. Up to then, women did it all. The mamas did. So I was going to be cool. You know, I was in my, you know, late 20s, and here's my baby. And everybody's over at our house after church, and someone said, like, the guys are saying, like, Paul, you need to help your baby over here. You know, she's done something in her diaper. You know, and I said, you better get the mother. And I said, no, I'll do it. And they said, you can do it? I said, yeah, guys, ain't nothing to it. You know? And so I went and got my baby, Mariah, and they followed me. The guys followed me. We got to see them change a diaper, you know? I put her down on the changing table. I put my mask and gloves on. I'm ready. I got everything sorted out on some front of the table like this. I opened it up. It was a number 10. It wasn't a number 2. It was a number 10. It was everywhere. It wasn't. I seen them on TV do it, you know? They didn't even get messed up. They didn't even put a robe on like me. And I just said, so I had to go, help, help. I had to call in the infantry to come and help me. And that was my first diaper change, you know. But on TV, it looks so easy. It's not easy. And y'all know that. It's not easy. If you decide to have children and become a godly parent, you've decided to give up quiet evenings together in front of the fireplace. Those are gone. No more good music. It's Disney music. No more quiet meals. I don't like it. I ain't eating it. I don't want it. I've already ate. Who knows? Crying. No intimate moments with your mate. If you do, it's hard to figure them out, when to get them. Your couch is no longer a couch. It's a trampoline. Your wife's decided to have wrinkles, and they come fast. You both decided that you want to talk louder now in the house. You got to talk louder in the house. Our house, I promise, it's the loud house. I'd say to my Brighton all the time, Brighton, she'll say, Daddy wants to eat. And I'll say, Brighton, not so loud. Okay. I mean, because I talk loud, and we all do. And again, to get over the volume. I had 5 in my family, brothers and sisters. We talked loud. You had to. You didn't get what you wanted. And I just carried it, and I try to be quiet. Honest, I do. Now there's new phrases in your house. Where are you going? Don't look at me like that. Daddy, I need some money. All these new things come. And again, you weren't ready for them. Most of the time, your parents, you're not ready for them. Your world completely changes. I'm not complaining now. But at that time, here's what you say. What in the world have we got ourselves into? Now, so I know people who've had twins. I get a friend who had triplets. She's still alive. She still functions pretty good. I see her every once in a while. She's kind of little days, but she's doing good. But, and that's why I say all the things I said at first, it's the greatest thing. I love them so much. A lot of those things don't come out until down the road. And then when they do, by the time they're gone, they're gone. With my little girl now, Brighton, she does some, here's what I say, what I learned. My boys, maybe sometimes my girls, my first marriage, they'd say, let's do this, Daddy, or play this with me, play that with me. And I'd say, well, the game's on. Hey, I'll do it after the game, or I'll do this. I got to go over here, and so you end up getting out of it. And I say, and now they're not there. And I say, I wish. My boy Addison used to do Legos, and he could make things, all Saturday afternoon. He'd make things, and then with engines and all that. And I'm not a Lego guy. And I'd go check on them, but I never really built very many things with them. We did other things, but I didn't do Legos. And I think now with Brighton, when she asked me to play Barbies, buddy, I'm Ken. I promise. I could play Ken all the time. First time, I probably would have said, I ain't playing Barbies. But they go so fast that I've learned I'm going to do it. Even and if I have to give it, there's no game worth watching. And there's no, I got to go here later or something like that. I'll do it later. That's what I've learned. But here's what God says. You say, what have I got yourself into? And here's what God says. You have got yourself into the greatest thing that you could ever do. You're in charge of helping these little souls come to heaven, go to heaven. And you have to remember about this. When they talk about abortion and things like that, what does the Bible teach? There's lots of, one of the verses when I was preaching on that a while ago, in the psalmist talks about how you knew me in the womb. You made me in the womb. With my the sinews and the bones, you formed me in the womb. So God is forming in the womb your child, and then after 9 months, it says, here it is. As we'll say, it's a gift. Now, help it go to heaven. And really, we talked about when somebody, is unfaithful and someone just leaves their mate, that's the most selfish thing you can do, because you're saying, I'm doing what I'm going to want to do. I don't care if it hurts anybody. You, my family, the church, I don't care. And when you have a little child and don't try to get it to heaven, you're saying, well, it's important, but it's not that important. The most important thing we can do as parents is try to help our kids go to heaven. So, what did we learn? We're going to try to be godly parents. What does God want us? There's no manual, if you say. You don't get a manual, but God tells us. This is what he says about children. First is steps. You got to have steps. And all the different steps that you have. You learn to be, you ought to be better parent with the second one, the third one, the fourth one. You ought to be better. And there's steps that you take and things that you learn in all things. The first thing that we have is children are a blessing. In Hebrew, to Psalms 127. Turn to Psalms 127. The first thing about children is they're a blessing. The Bible calls it a heritage, but it's just like an inheritance. You're getting a great inheritance. Psalms 127, verse 3. Psalms 127. Psalms 127. And in verse 3. Children are a heritage or a blessing, some versions say, from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with their enemies in the gate. So they're a heritage. And not only that, they're like a warrior. He's in a battle, and man, his first arrow doesn't work, and the second one misses. He's like having your children are like arrows. They help you. And again, they help you in lots of different ways. They may cause your hair to go grayer and lots of things like that. But emotionally and spiritually and all those things, they help us like nobody else can. And the man who has his quiver full of them is blessed. It's interesting. Back in the Old Testament, there's a story where the people of children of Israel were taken to Babylon, and they were captives. There was no temple to worship at, and they couldn't. They made fun of them. They asked them to sing so they could laugh at them, that kind of a thing. So they prayed to God, God, what should we do? We don't have a temple. They make fun of us when we worship. What should we do? And two of the things he tells them to do, the first one is what God will tell any of us. You got to obey the laws of the land. You got to obey, as long as it's not ungodly, ask you to do. If they ask you to work, you got to work and be good workers. So obey the laws. And the second thing he tells them is have more children. And today, that's a strange thing. People say, I wouldn't bring any children into this world today. I've heard grandparents say, good thing I already had mine because the world is so bad today, I wouldn't bring them in. That's not what God says. He says have some children. I'm not saying you've had 10, 20, or 30, but have some children. And to think the world, without good children, how are the bad children going to learn? And without good parents teaching them and so forth, a family. One time, and you've seen it too if you've been out. I know because of the virus it's kind of hard, but in the past, you go to, you're staying in a hotel, and you go down, hotels usually have breakfast that you can have, and you're all sitting down there. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen the whole family sitting there, and everybody's on their what? They don't even talk to each other. Mums and daddies, everybody's on their phone. Now, here comes a family down. Now, again, you don't do it to show off. I'm not saying that, but I remember this happened to our family. So we're all sitting there. By the time everyone gets there, we said a prayer, and then we do have a rule. You can't have a cell phone during any meals at the table. So we talk and yell and scream like we always do. We're loud. Everyone knows our business. And I met a family, an older family came up and said, thank you so much for saying a prayer. And another family said, how did you get not to use their cell phones? And again, we didn't do it for a show. But and I said, boy, and that's what it's like. And so when the Lord says they're a heritage, it is. Families teach. That's why we talk about being a godly family and be godly children. They teach, other kids. And they're a blessing. And evil people need. So the idea, especially I tell young people, try to have children. And, is it more expensive to have 1, 2, or 3, or 4? I don't know. They're all expensive. They're all expensive. And that's just the way. Usually when you have a child now, we never had preachers don't have, we can't get in group plans of insurance. Like, you work for a company, you get groups. So we have independent, and so that's usually a little higher. And so every time we've had a baby, it took about 3 years till we fully owned her. You pay so much a month. You know what I mean? And I remember said, hey, 2 more payments and you're mine. And then that's like your car. Now what? Now she'll fall apart, She'll start going crazy and it costs me more money. God says they're a blessing. So that's the first thing. Godly parents, what do they say? My children are a blessing. And then that's the first thing you realize. God gave them to you. So now what does God want me to do with these children? He wants you to guide them. Because they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. Just the idea of a little baby, if you don't feed it in 1 or 2 days, it's not going to live. And if you don't leave it out and live in the cold or the heat, it's not going to live. So you've got to take care of it that way. And now you got to guide them that they don't know which way to go. And you take their hand and you take their heart and you got to give them some guidance. So that means you got to be there. If you're not there, you're in trouble. And I know people travel a lot. They used to now because of the virus, people have been learning to work at home. You can't be gone all the time, mums or daddies. You can't. God didn't give you children so your grandparents would raise them. They didn't. That doesn't mean grandparents can't help, but you have to raise them. And you've got to be the guidance, and you've got to teach them. In Genesis 18:19, here's what the Lord said to Abraham, way back in the Old Testament. In Genesis 18 and in verse 19. 18, verse 19. Here's the Lord speaking. In 18 and verse 19. For I have known him, talking about Abraham, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteous and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. He said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless Abraham, but Abraham's got some requirements and something. He's got to teach his children. So it's always been that way. God's always expected us to lead them and to guide them. The parents take the kids to school so they'll learn. They take them to sports so they can learn how to be a good athlete or good team and learn those things. And you got to take them to Jesus. You got to take them to Jesus. And we'll talk a little bit about what you can do. But you take them to Jesus. And you show them Jesus in lots of different ways. Because Matthew 16:26 is one that's helped me as a parent. 16:26. And it's not even talking about being a parent, really. But it's principles there. 16:26. What profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Matthew 16:26. What will a man give in exchange for his soul? You know, your child might be the All-American in sports. They may be the smartest valedictorian, and all those things are good. But if they aren't going to heaven, what do they have? What did you do? You know, I have a lesson about what's the last thing you would say to your children if you're on your deathbed? I mean, at first you'd say, you're my favorite, you know, you're my boy. Remember we went hunting. You remember we went to games. And your girl, oh, you always were the prettiest. I remember when I walked you down the aisle. You remember all the, you probably reminisce a couple things. But what's the last thing you'd say? And I thought what I'd say, and mine would be something like, paraphrased like, you got to love Jesus to your last breath. You got to love Jesus. You got to serve. Do what he wants you to do, no matter what. And I'm going to be, you know, you could even throw in, I'm going to be in heaven waiting for you. Please come up there and see me. Something like that. I think that's what everybody would say. I don't care if your son or daughter was president of the United States. You're going to say, I'm so glad you were president. You made me happy. No. You make me happy. I want you to be in heaven. I think that's what we do. And that's what our goal is. In Proverbs 22, verse 6, this is not an absolute, but it's an absolute in the sense that in most cases it's true. A lot of people say, well, they don't like to hear this verse because it makes it gives them an excuse of why they weren't very good as a parent. Maybe 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he'll not depart from it. He won't depart. The idea, well, does some depart? Yes, I know some godly men and women who raised their kids and their kids turned out terrible. Now, from what I don't know what went on behind closed doors, so that's another thing. But from all you can see, you say, man. That guy and girl are great. I don't know what happened. And again, every child has their own. If there was things you could do, then everybody would do it. But there's circumstances. Maybe somebody they married. Maybe where they lived. Maybe the job they had. A lot of things can go into it. But the principle is if you teach them when they get old. And mine are in their 30s now. And some of yours have had older children than that. All I can say is you keep on talking to them. And if they go through times where they're not going to church or they're not thinking about the Lord, you keep praying because they're honest. You're just reinforcing what they've heard. And they'll start coming back. In most cases, they do. Unless there's something that really takes over the body, an addiction maybe, or some kind of crime they're involved in. Something like that where they just takes over. But most of them would seem to, in my experience, they'll come back. A child that doesn't have leadership, they're going to rebel at home, at school, of course the laws, and they're going to end up in prison. And so godly parents, you got to provide leadership. See, now I got different faces up there because sometimes you're happy. Sometimes, hey, that's all right, I got you, baby. You ain't. Oh, I can't believe what you did. Oh, man, I'm giving up, And sometimes that's what it's like, all those different things. But you got to keep trying, and I've had all of those. Here's the next one. You got to give them love. That's the mom and daddy's hands and the little girl's heart or little boy's hearts right there. And that seems logical. You got to give them love. But a lot of times people don't know how to give love. They really don't. They really don't know what it is. And we don't have to turn to 1 Corinthians 13, but that's the passage we use. Love is patient, it's kind, and it's thoughtful, and it's not bearing, those kind of things. The idea of the love for a parent is you put that child's welfare before yours. You need to be willing to die for your mate and for your children. So it's that young child needs affection, and you got to show them. And it doesn't stop when they get older. Teenagers need a hug. They need a kiss. There's different stages of showing love. Now let's take someone between 0 and 4. How do you show your child that you love them from 0 to 4? What do you do? Tell me some things you did or you think you ought to do that work for you. What do you do? How does your child? My little girl says, she tells me she loves me. What did she say? What have I done? What did you do? What did you do? You play with them. When they're little, you play with them. And you play Barbies, and you play boats, you play army, you play with them. You play with them because that's what friends do. People that love you, they play with. What else did you, when you're 0 to 4, you're doing? What are you going to do? You're going to play with them. What else? Yeah, you squeeze them. I remember when my baby was, when they were really little, like one and older. I remember I'd have my, just on my shirt off and just my chest, and my baby liked to sit on my chest. I guess because it was warm, you know what I mean, like that. And she'd just sit there, and I promise, I didn't move for an hour because my baby's on me. Anybody else, get off. Even if your wife, get off me. Come on, I'm trying to watch the game, And the other kids come, you're too big, you're killing my leg, get off of me. But my little baby would sit there. I promise, I was a zombie. I didn't want to do anything. That's my baby. And then you look at them. You remember how you looked at them? You count their fingers and you see their hair. It's just something. So you hug them. What else did you do? You played with them. You comfort them. You went for you pushed them in a carriage. You bought them stuff. You bought them a little ice cream. You buy them little things. You did just like everyday things for them. Yeah, but I think time is one. You always have time. You have time for them. And I think this is real important, especially, and again, people always get upset with me and get mad at me, but I got to say it in a nice way. Your grandparents, the grandparents are not to raise the kids when they're little, or any age really. You have to raise them. And when they go off to work, and then they take them to a daycare center. I'm not saying the daycare centers aren't nice people, but they got 20 kids running around. And, they don't, I remember one time one of our neighbors, when I lived in another town, they had a little baby and they both worked. And so they asked us to watch the little boy. And I remember what she said. When he takes his first step, don't tell me. I want to think I'm the first one to see it. And when they speak the first thing, don't tell them. Don't tell me. I want to think I heard. She said, Mommy first. Her first word was Daddy because I was always playing with the little boy, He called me Daddy all the time. He called me Daddy for a couple of years. He didn't call Scott the Daddy. He called me. And I thought about that. And I was just young, and I said, that's sad, isn't it? And I'm not, so what does that mean? You might not make as much money. You may not. And so many young couples today, when they get married, they want to get married and start off, and again, grandparents and everyone, we got to try to teach them this. They want the same kind of house that took you 40 years to get. Am I right? That's the truth. One time I was, there was a young couple getting married, and I think I baptized one or both of them. And so I went and said, well, I know them pretty good. I'm going to go to, how they register. So I registered, went into the place and said, I need a place setting for the Smith family. The lady said, okay, that'll be $200. I said, no, ma'am, I don't want a setting for 8. I want just one place setting, $200. And then I said, how much is a plate? $80. I got him a spoon for 20. I love him still, but I got him a spoon for 20. I couldn't imagine. Now, hey, they're just starting out. And I remember I told that story one time, and some older couple came up and said, Paul, when we got married, we had $82 in our pocket. And I'm not saying it's bad, but again, that's another part of raising your kids. You got to just try to get them to understand how much things cost, and they don't get everything. But now the person's older. Now, let's say their school years. Let's say they're first grade to 7th grade. Now, how do you show your love? You got to do some more things. You just can't let them sit on your chest, and you can't play Barbies anymore. They're not doing. What do you do now to show your love? You got to listen, because they're going to have all kind of questions, new things, old things. They're going to have all kind of questions. What else? Well, that's coming up. That's coming up. And you're going to fix their cars. That's right. What else are you going to do with them? Yeah, reading is so important. And again, you'd be surprised. I've subbed and taught in schools all over America in my years. The kids cannot read like they used to. It's because they don't read hardly anymore. They don't read. Everything's, and it lasts like real quick. Nobody reads a newspaper anymore. That's what we used to read. They don't even read comics. There's no funny comics. They'll watch a comic story. They don't read. They read to them. And again, that starts when you're young. So you got to start. That's something we do with Brighton. we read stories, and it could be Bible stories. It could most little children's stories are great because they always have a kind of a moral lesson to it. Like the dog's mean at the first, and then all of a sudden he doesn't bite anybody anymore. Even the Disney stories are like that, Beauty and the Beast. They end up being nice. So reading's good. You're going to have to buy school clothes with them. They start playing some sports, and you can go to sports with them and those kind of things. And now high school. What do you got to do now? They're high school age. To show you love them, what do you got to do? Got to fix the car. First, you got to teach them how to drive. You better pack that in. Let school do it. You got to teach them. Yes. That's right. And to be around them, I asked 15 high school kids a while ago in the class. I asked them how often they had dinner together. How often they had dinner. What do you think the highest number was that when somebody said? 2. Most 1. Most like, well, sometimes we don't. Now, growing up, raise your hand if almost in every occasion, with the odd exception, that you had you had supper together as a family. Most of us did. Now, because of the schedules and all that, it is hard. But you got to have some time together, and that's so important. That's exactly true. No, that's exactly right. You're not supposed to be you're not their friend first. Someone said, and it's nice if someone says, "My mother's my best friend." That's nice. My daddy's my best friend. That's okay. But it's not. But the daddy wasn't. His goal is say, "My goal is to be my boy's best friend." No, it's not. Because best friends, they'll let you do some stuff that you shouldn't do. Your friends will. You be the mother first. You be the daddy. And so to be that, how many times, I don't think I had a friend growing up who ever said, "Paul, don't do that." Maybe I had bad friends. Just think, if you had some godly friends, maybe they might have, but because they were saying, that's a good idea, Paul. Let's go do it, Let's do some bad things, whatever. Not terrible things, but things we shouldn't have done. But, the parents, we don't say, we say, no. You're not doing that. And that's right. And I'll talk to that in a minute coming up on discipline. When you discipline them, you got to have some rules. God says have rules. Yes. Yes. And I know a lot of families who, during that age, they always make sure that all the activities are at their house so they can watch. Because, say, well, are their parents going to be home? Say they're going to Mary's house. Is Mary's parents home? Oh, Mary's parents are always home, and they're not home. And so other things go on. So you've got to guide them, and they don't know maybe some bad things are going to happen. They don't know the boys are going over there or something's going to be. They're not old enough to really, they haven't experienced, but you know what could happen. So you've got to guide them and let them say, And I remember my kids, a lot of times, they said, "Daddy, you wouldn't believe." The parents weren't even there. And they said they were going to be there. I said, "I know." But they said that so you'd come. They knew if you said your parents weren't, you wouldn't come. So, yeah, that's right. You got to know their friends, try to help them get good friends, and still they're going to have some that are going to be not so great. Anything else you can think of? But they all need affection. And this is something I can't believe you have to say, but you do. You got to tell them you love them. I said last night, my dad never said he loved me. I know he did. Daddies didn't say it then. And now, maybe he did. I just didn't hear it. But make sure your kids hear it. I try to say, even my boy, 32, the last thing I say to my boy always, "Hey, I love you, Daddy." Even my little girl, "Love you, Daddy." I try to say it, and I want him to know that. And give him a hug. When I was in Salt Lake City, the Mormons teach families really well, and that's that. But they're not affectionate. Even though that's what they always talk, because they talk about when you die, you get to go to heaven with your family. One question they always said to you, the Mormon boys will say, and I coached them all, and they all been on the missions, and they always start the talks like this. They'd say, Paul, wouldn't you like to be with your wife and children for eternity? That's what they always ask you. And then don't answer. I don't answer right away. They say, why? I said, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. I don't know. All of them? How about can I pick a couple? You know what I mean? For eternity? I know what they're saying because that's what they teach. But they don't show any affection to each other. Addison, when he was in 7th, 8th, and 9th at home, our high schools are big. We'd have 850 in a class. So that's, you talk about 4,000 maybe in your school. So I go to and I coach football, so the kids who were maybe the louder ones or maybe they knew who I was. So I'd come in and Addison, sometimes I'd see Addison in the cafeteria. Addison would come up and he'd hug me. You ought to have seen the first time he hugged me, all his friends. I don't think their daddies had ever hugged him. And he hugged him right in front of everybody. And I might have rubbed his head or something like that, And I remember, and we didn't do it for show, and then I realized, they probably thought, what is this? What kind of church does this guy go to, And again, I'm not saying we do it for show, but that's what you do, And I remember coming home from the airplane. When you come home from the airplane, people would be getting off the plane, and here come my kids. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. You've maybe felt that, and you hug them. And that's what they need. They need to be told that they're loved because their friends make fun of them lots of times. Not the friends, but people at school, like we said. It's really hard during those years, and they don't make a team or something. And so you got to be there. You got to show them love. Anything else? Any other ways you can think of? Yes. That's my next. Let me see if that's my next point. Yes, you got to encourage them, and you got to support. Y'all know who Lady Bird Johnson is? Who's Lady Bird Johnson? Yeah, President Johnson's wife. Yes, honest. I've asked that before. I'll have the audience to know who Johnson was. President Johnson was, let alone Lady Bird. But that was one of her sayings, and they're going to live as you believe with them. And so you got to keep telling them, you're doing good. Keep it up. You can do it. All those things. Godly parents make sure that their children know that you care about them. And if they have bad grades, that's all right. We're going to work on it. You're not dumb. We're going to work on it. And I know you didn't make the team, but that's all right. We'll try another sport, or we'll work. You still got to show their worth, even though they maybe didn't make something that you want. But spiritually, when they mess up, you still got to tell them. No, I'm not saying don't get on them. Say, hey, how many times have I told you? You don't do that. And of course, well, my friends did it. I didn't mean to. Those kind of things. And you got to say, look, you can't do that. And now you got to encourage them. You can do it. You don't say you're useless because they might say, well, you know what? I can't give this up. I got to keep doing it. I might as well not go to church anymore. Something like that. So you can't do that. You say, look, you got to think about it. And then you would say, look, Sunday morning in church, when we're singing, I want you to think about this, or when that song, or something. Don't tell them they're not coming. You got to keep encouraging them and tell them it's going to be okay. They're going to get better. You can yell at them enough so much they think that they're no good. And I know you've all met kids, and maybe some of our kids are even, we yelled at them too much or something, and they just don't think they're any good anymore. You got to encourage them. Keep telling them they can do it. They can do it. Now, to love them now and encourage them, it doesn't mean they get all they want. Kids today think it's their God-given right to go to McDonald's and Chick-fil-A every day. Am I right? Hey, there's McDonald's. Where are you going? What for lunch? Chick-fil-A. My little girl, of course, she's only 4. What does she say? I say, I'm not buying no more barbers. They cost too much. We're not going to Chick-fil-A. And she'll say, Daddy, just go to the bank and get some money. I think when they're 20 years old, they still think that. Just go to the bank and get some money. I say, hey, I'm a little older, maybe some, but growing up, I went to McDonald's. I think it was 11th grade was the first time I went, but it was a treat to go out to eat. It was a treat. And one of the first things when people are trying to get young couples who are having money problems, what they tell them to cut down the risk? Bring your lunch to work. And I think it was like you save $100, $200 a month if you just bring your lunch to work or something like that. And so just the idea of how much you could save and how much you make eating out. And so they don't get all sports. I remember when Mike Blake one time, he wanted nowadays some Air Jordans or something. They're $150. I said, there's no shoes worth $150. I run, and I'm here to tell you, there's not much difference between a $60 pair of running shoes to $120. Depends. There's the odd one if you have some foot problems and things like that. But honest, it's cosmetic, almost everything. You only can do so much for a shoe. So I buy all my shoes the next year. When the 2022 shoes come out this year, I'm getting my 2021 ones. They're half price, and they're the same except they're a different color. That's what the guys will say. Oh, well, what's the difference? He goes, oh, they got beautiful color this year. I say, I'm running in the mud. I don't care. I'll take these other ones. And so, but they want 100. Nobody. And I said to my kid, you're not good enough to wear $120 shoes. You got to teach them some things. They want all these things. When I was growing up, we got one Coke a year at Christmas time. And I'm here to tell you, you can make a Coke last a whole holiday. Honest. And I'm not saying, our neighborhood, my dad had a saying. He said, we're not poor, we just don't have any money. I always remembered that. The kids don't want to hear that, but when I left Canada to come to the United States to go to college, and the kids don't have it, we need to somehow teach the kids that you don't get everything, but you get what you need. And what you get is good. We never missed a meal growing up, our family. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and we had 7 living in the house. We weren't on game. All our neighbors were like that. All our town was like that. That's just the way we are. Nobody thought we were. But the people behind us used to have macaroni and cheese. And I thought only rich people had macaroni and cheese. I did. We didn't have it. I thought only rich people did. And I always wanted, and the reason we didn't was because my mother said it wasn't because we couldn't afford it, because now I get it, it's cheap. I like macaroni. I tell my kids, let's get macaroni and cheese. That's better than Olive Garden, so you save $100, So I'm going to do that. But she just didn't think it was good for us health. Too much macaroni wasn't good for you. So I'll go to college. I'm at Western Kentucky University playing college football. And after practice, you go through the line. You go through the line and you get food. And so I did some dumb things. I made Canada look bad. I was going through the line, and the ladies up front, she said, and the guy says, yeah, I'll take some roast beef, and I'll take some, green beans, and I'll take some macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese. This school is great. This school is great. So I go to this guy. I'm just figuring out. I'm looking. So I go. I give the lady, you have your plate. I give her my plate. She says, what would you like? I said, I want some macaroni and cheese. She said, what else? I said, macaroni and cheese. I got a whole plate of macaroni and cheese. They had roast beef and chicken, all kind of stuff you could get. I go and sit down. Again, I'm the first Canadian these guys in Kentucky have ever met. And I don't know any of them. I sit down, and the guys are going. They always call me like this. They say, Sheehan, what do you eat macaroni and cheese for? It says, don't they have that in Canada? I thought I was showing off. I thought I was saying, that's right, buddy. I'm at macaroni and cheese. We're well off where I come from, Nobody hardly even had it on their plate a little bit. Then they had more meat and grits and stuff like that. And I had my macaroni, and I said, I had a whole plate. And I said, no, man. I said, I just like macaroni. I never had it. I said, I just like macaroni and cheese. And then as time went on, I realized what a dumb guy I looked like, But I thought that's what rich people ate. And I always think about that, your parents teaching you different things. And no matter if you had macaroni and cheese, that's still good. That's still good. And you love them. But they don't get everything that they want. To be a godly parent, you got to love them, of course, and you got to keep encouraging them. Here's one right here, of course. You got to discipline. And here's the sad thing about discipline. Usually you discipline your child according to how you were disciplined. And if you were whooped and beaten up by your parents, that's how you think you do it. And if your parents did nothing, then that's how you think you do it. So now you got a godly parent. You got a wife who's never been spanked, never been yelled at. Maybe didn't need to be. And you got a husband who got whooped every day. And now the child disobeys. You're in trouble. Father says, come over here. Mother says, don't touch him. He said, well, he needs a whooping. He just broke the glass or did something. Well, Why don't you just give them another chance? And you might. We'll talk about that. Maybe you do. But now you got a problem. Because, now you get, so what do you have to, as godly parents, we have an answer. We have an answer. And that's, what does God want me to do? And both godly, and if you've never been, I'm not saying spanking is something you have to do, but I'm saying if you've never been spanked, maybe it's something you think about. And if you spank too much, maybe you need to slow down a bit. What does God say? That's what a godly parent says, and tries to learn what's good. Here's 3 verses. Well, look at Proverbs 13:24. Here's what God says about it. And again, when parents have a child, what do? Well, here's what God says, and now you try to discipline them. Now you got to pick your discipline. And sometimes it's good for somebody who's never been, quote, we say spanked, because they can maybe control the guy who thinks you got to do it all the time, and vice versa. Look at Proverbs 13:24. 13:24. He who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves them disciplines them promptly. So it says here, you got to discipline. It doesn't tell you how to discipline them, but you got to do it, and you got to do it quickly. Again, that's the problem we talk about in the in the judicial service today. We got a guy in Alabama who killed a policeman. And it's 21 years. He's still been on trial. And it's 20. The people who 9/11, its 20th anniversary just happened. Did you know the Al Qaeda guys and all those terrorists down in Cuba down in there? They just started having the trial, and they had to suspend it again. The guys the guilty guys who did it, who were being held captive, it's 20 years. They still haven't had a trial yet. They're in, that was a big thing that came up in the news. But here it said, you got to do it promptly now. You got to do it promptly. So that's the first thing. You got to discipline them if you love them. And since you love them, God says you got to discipline them. Now you go to 19:18. What do you do next? 19:18. You got to do something because you want to be a godly parent. Chasing your son while there's hope. So I think that's that. You got to do it when it's young. If they're already doing it for 10 years, you're going to have a hard time. While there's still hope of changing them, don't set your heart on his destruction. Don't let him keep doing it because he's going to be destroyed, his soul, and he may end up in jail. And what he's doing is going to harm him physically and spiritually. So while there's hope, you got to do it and get your heart right. And then 23:13 says this. 23:13. Don't withhold correction from a child. Okay, there you go. You're going to discipline him. If you beat him with a rod, he'll not die. Beat him's not a good word because it gives the idea you're going to whip him until he's hurting. But the idea of using some kind of rod, he's not going to die. You'll beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. It's interesting, schools, do you remember growing up, why did schools have paddles? We had in our school, the Catholic schools, you got hit with a paddle. We got a belt on your hands, like a barber's belt on your hands for doing bad. But why did the schools do it? I mean, it was just a principle that was passed on from the 1718s. The schools did it. And where I grew up with the Catholic schools, the nuns, everybody was scared to death. The nuns were the ones who hit you. And they hit you like you're hitting a home run. They would whip you, buddy. And they really did it too much. They really did it sometimes way above. But the idea was, it was passed on. It was a good thing to do. And then, of course, the abuse, some people did use it for abuse. But for children, in Canada, it's against the law to spank your child. It's against the law. And now the reason they passed that law was so some children would not be abused. So the purpose was, if nobody can get spanked, then the crazy guys will be put in jail who do it. But the other people who are Christians, you really have to do it behind closed doors. You got to do it behind closed doors. In Canada, even other places. When I preached in Utah, a lot of times my lessons would be taped and they'd be on the air, and I'd say something like this, and I always said this, and like this, and spare them with a rod. Now, for those of you in California, that means talk loud to them, so I wouldn't get sued or something, because they would know. I would say, for those in California, I'm not saying you whoop them. That means just talk loud, or roll up a newspaper like this, or something. But you got to discipline them. Now, you got to consider, what's their age? They're little. Did they even understand what they did? Two little kids were playing one time in the living room with water pistols, and the mother said, "Don't you get water on my furniture." And they said, "We won't, Mom, we're using ink." They didn't know. They're just little. So you got to sometimes you just got to say, "Don't do that again." My little one, 4, came home the other day and she said something. It wasn't a bad word, but she said something. I said, where'd you learn it? Well, somebody said it. I said, don't say that. That's not a nice thing. That's not a nice thing. Now, if they're 15 and they come home and they're cussing, you say, we don't say that. And this is what it means. It's not a good thing. Don't say it. Now, if they say it some more, now you see, you got to consider. They know what they're doing. So how old are they? And then really, how many times you told them? They might even be a teenager and didn't know that was a bad word or something like that. And then, what happens is, you told them now and explained it. Now they ought to know better. And the purpose of it is to teach them. 15:10. And you can't, of course, discipline them when they're mad, when you're mad, because you might take it out on them. You're upset. 15:10. They took you away from the game. They took you away from someplace. Get in here. I've been trying to sleep, and look at what you did. Now you're mad. You're going to whoop them because you didn't get to sleep. 15:10, what does it say? Harsh discipline is for him who forsakes the way, who's not obeying. Really, it's what God wants him to be. And he who hates correction will die. And so it's the idea of, even kids sometimes understand that what the purpose is. Punishment is to correct and make it kind of correlate to the crime. If they lied, make them tell the truth. If they stole, they got to give it back. If they were drinking, driving, they don't get the car anymore. If they're late coming home, you don't get to go out anymore. Now, how do you deliver it? There's sometimes you're going to have to use the rod, like the Lord says, and you got to do it in a proper way. Sometimes if they're little, of course, you do timeouts. Sometimes they're grounded. Every family's got their own kind of things. One thing that I think is always goofy, and y'all might do it, but I still think it's goofy, is I'm going to count to 10. Man, you ought to count to 1. That's it. I'm not giving them 10. 10 times before you put down that grocery, put down that Captain Crunch in the aisle. I'm counting to 10. I've been in the grocery store where they're counting to 100. The kids won't obey. Someone said, well, what, didn't your daddy count to 10? He could only go to 2 or 3. I mean, he only went to, that's all he could do. He didn't know the numbers after that. He didn't count to 10. I asked an old timer one time, did your daddy, I called him the general. He since passed away. I said, did your daddy count to 10? He said, he didn't count to anything. In fact, he sometimes started, he whooped me thinking, what do you want me for? He should say, you ought to known you shouldn't have done that. He didn't even tell him what not to do. He got whooped for doing something that you're supposed to have known he was supposed to do. I said, what about today? He said, today the kids get chances. So the point is, however you want, but you can't let them decide. And there's boundaries. You can't do this. If you do it, if you come home late, you're not going out the next day. And you got to stick to it. You got to stick to it. Yeah, hey, and that's right. But tomorrow, on Sunday morning, I'm talking about, and for children, if you disobey your parents, it says it's better for the birds to come and pick your eyes out. That's the first verse you need to take your children to memorize. There's our memory work, not Jesus wept. If you disobey your parents, a bird's going to come, an eagle, and pick your eyes out. Okay, that's it. Got that one? Let's practice it every morning. That's what you do. But, old saying, this is going to hurt you more than me, and it truly, it does when you're little. It does. It does. Okay, I've got to go a little faster, but I got this right here quick. Here's 10 rules to ruin your children. Begin in infancy to give the child everything he wants. In this way, he'll grow up to believe that the world owes him a living. When he picks up bad words, laugh at him. This will make him think he's cute. He'll also encourage him to pick up cuter phrases. Never give him any spiritual training. Wait till he's 21, then let him decide for himself. Avoid the use of the word wrong. It may develop into a guilt complex. Later, when he's arrested, he can conclude that society is against him and he's being persecuted. Pick up everything he leaves lying around, books, shoes, clothes. Do everything for him so he will experience in throwing all responsibility upon others. Let him read any printed material that he can get his hands on. Be careful that the silverware and drinking glasses are sterilized, but let his mind feast on garbage. Quarrel frequently in the presence of your children. In this way, they will not be shocked when their home is broken up later. Give a child all the spending money he wants. Never let him earn his own. Why should he have things as tough as you had them? Satisfies every craving for food, drink, and comfort. See that every sensual desire is gratified. Denial may lead to harmful frustration. Take his part against neighbors, teachers, police officers. They all are prejudiced against your child. When he gets into trouble, apologize to yourself by saying, I never could do anything with him. Prepare for a life of grief. You will be likely to have it. And when you think about this, the idea of And I think all parents have been like this. I want my kids to have some things that my kids never had, that I never had. I want that. But you can't give them everything. And you can give them some things, but they maybe have to earn it a little bit. You know what I mean? And the new inventions we have are great. It's great what we have, but we can't give them everything. And as godly parents, that's what we have to do. We've got to do our best, to teach them responsibility and that they have to work. But then you got to teach them. And don't become weary. You got to teach them. It's not the elders, preachers, Bible class teachers' responsibility alone. They're going to help you, but you have to teach them about God. Deuteronomy 6 is one of the best verses. If you don't have this underlined in your Bible, I use it all the time. It's one of the greatest verses. This is really what you're to do. This is the Lord speaking to Israel. And these words, Deuteronomy 6:6, which I command you today, shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Bind them on a sign on your hand, as a frontlets between your eyes. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Teach them everywhere you go. Godly parents, that's what they try to do. And they teach truly by their example. They dress in a godly way. They speak in a godly way. Their activities are godly ways. Sometimes, there are certain shows that a mom and daddy can watch that the kids don't need to watch. And I'm not saying because it's bad words or nudes, and I'm not saying you don't watch any of that. But I mean, there might be a grown-up show, whatever that might be, maybe a delivery of a baby, and the little kid doesn't need to see that right away. Something like that in the show. And so sometimes, though, my kids will come and say, Daddy, are you watching a bad show? Or is that a good show? So you got to teach them that there's good things and bad things, and by your examples. And so you teach them by your example. Then by word, you teach them by the word. You tell them about Jesus, and you talk about Jesus when you're driving down the road, when you're looking in the rainbow. Anything you can find. Who made the rain? Who made this? Who we thanking? I always try to teach your children that it all goes back to Jesus. You sing with them. Sing VBS songs. Sing church songs. Whenever I swing my little girl, Brighton, I sing this, what can wash away my sins? And she'll say, nothing but the blood of Jesus. So, I'm not saying I'm any better, but you can sing them in the car. You can do little things like that. Read the Bible and view it, and let your children see the Bible. One time the preacher was over for dinner during the meeting, and so the family was trying to impress the preacher how religious they were, and they said, Johnny, go in that other room and get that book we read all the time. You'll see, this is the one we read all the time. The kids know it, you'll see. And so the little kid comes back and says, here, Mama, here's the Sears and Roebuck catalog. If you don't read the Bible or do something else, don't know what you're doing. So entertainment, make sure that you have good TVs, shows and radios and family meals, as we said, together. Ephesians, of course, tells us what? Bring up your children in nurture and admonition of the Lord. Godly parents teach, and they teach, and you got to be a team. You got to teach them together. One can't teach one thing and another thing. You'll just have trouble. You'll just have trouble all the time. You got to do it as a team. You got to be consistent. That's the same with discipline. You got to be consistent when you teach them. Let the kids know they're not going to wear you down. They're going to try, please, come on, can I do it? And I promise, there's usually one of the two parents that's going to give in if they do it good enough. Not if they know from the beginning, you ain't getting me down. They know, no. And it's okay to say no. In fact, you got to say no on lots of things that they do. And try. Sometimes you say no now, maybe yes later on. It depends on different things, And you try, you pray always for wisdom. You got to pray for wisdom, that you'll make choice. That's what I pray about all the time. Help me be a good husband. Help me be wise. Help me be a good parent, because it's hard. It's hard. And then, of course, you might ask somebody. There's no harm in that. What did you do when your child did this? How do you stop them from doing that? Just anything like ask somebody. And if someone asks you, don't be surprised. Don't make them feel like they're not a good parent, because they are. They're just trying to do what's right. Godly parenting. it's difficult because we're not going to give them everything, and we're going to discipline them. But the main thing is we want our kids to go to heaven. And the greatest way for them to go to heaven is they're going to probably is us going to heaven. If we're not living godly, our kids aren't going to follow. Probably. They're not going to. There's the odd exception. But you've got to live right. You got to live right. And you brought him in the world. That's what I tell people. You brought him in the world. You better raise him right. Remember we talked about marriage vows. When you had a marriage vow, if you don't keep your marriage vow, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. If you vow to God and don't keep it, and you leave your mate, you're in trouble. That's what the Bible says. You know, it's sin. And you take, when you got the baby, God blessed you. He said, here, this is your baby. And you took a vow, in essence. You've prayed, oh, Lord, please let the baby be healthy. Please let it. You probably have made a vow. I'm going to serve it to you. You better keep your vow. And how do you do it? The best way is just live right. If you don't live right, then it is hard. If you commit crimes, they're probably, I forget the number of statistics of people who are in jail now, and their parents are in jail. But that's all they know. They sold drugs. This guy sells drugs, you know. Even in occupations, a lot of times the parents' occupation, that decides what the kids are going to do. So we want to be godly parents. And that's why we don't have a baby, but a lot of times when I get to this point in my lesson, I hold a little baby. I find a little baby in the audience, and I hold it, and I'll say, how many here want this baby to go to heaven? Everybody wants their baby to go. Everyone go to heaven. You think who do you think wants this baby to go to heaven more than anybody else? Parents. Now you better, how are they going to do it? Just like we said, all those things we said, you got to be a godly parent. And if you're not, you got to say you're sorry. And when you mess up as a parent, you go you and tell them. One time Addison, I got two girls, and Addison, you know, Addison always would beat them up and do stuff, you know, a little throw stuff at them. So one time the girls came and said, Addison hit us. And I said, come here and get downstairs. We went downstairs. I corrected them. I went upstairs. The girls were laughing. I said, what are you laughing about? They lied to me. They just wanted Addison to get in trouble, you see. They didn't know he might get spank him, but they didn't know what, they thought he might just get yelled at or something. So I go downstairs. There's my boy. He's on the bed crying. I messed up. And I said, Addie, I'm sorry, buddy. Your daddy messed up. Daddies aren't perfect. I said, and I was bad here, Addie, and I want you to forgive me. Please forgive me. He said, that's okay, Daddy. You're the best daddy I know. I always remember that. And I messed up. So we all mess up. And you might have messed up and your child's already married now. And you think about it now and you say, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't want you, don't do that. Don't do whatever I allowed you to do, or don't do what I did to you, or whatever it might be, because I don't want you to do that to your child. Don't be as harsh as I was, or whatever it might be. They don't even have to be at home anymore. You can still tell them, I should have been better. I should have let you do this or that, or not do that. I should have stopped you from doing. I should have made you, go to services when you're little, or whatever. But just tell them you're sorry. Just tell them you're sorry. It's hard to be a godly parent. It's really hard. So the young, remember what we said about the young couple last night? Remember the ones, oh, it's easy to be married. It's easy to be married. We never argue. And then I said, well, y'all live in two different houses? Oh, it's easy to be a parent. Guess who says it's easy to be a parent? Y'all know who says it all the time. Who says it? People that what? People have no kids. Oh, it's easy. And in fact, they even know what they're going to do, don't they? They say this, I tell you what, when I have kids, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And I always say, buddy, don't be saying, I promise. I said that, you're going to do that times 10. You think so? I say, I know so. You will. You will. Well, my kids aren't going like this one. My kids will never do that. I know they're going to do 10 times worse. You'll wish that's all they did. They'll do something else. Okay, let's have a prayer. Thank you, Father, so much always for loving us. And we're thankful that we can be blessed with children. And if we are, may we realize what a blessing it is. And may we do all we can to raise them up so they can go to heaven. We want to go, Father, but our children, they depend on us. And we have to be that good example. Please forgive us, Father, when we aren't the parents we should be. Please give us wisdom to make wise choices and help our children. Thank you so much for loving us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you. We'll be back. Our next class starts at 11:50 again, 11:50.